Hi guys, I'm back. I didn't kill myself. Not yet, at least. I've just had a bit of a writer's block. I've had a lot of scripts written out for these past few weeks, but going back and revising, none of them sounded as interesting as they were when I initially started writing them. This video is just going to be a new iceberg video. Today we're going to be looking into the Ohio Iceberg, unfortunately. Being an Ohio man myself, I felt I was the most qualified to cover this topic out of 0 people, and as such, I've even added my own topics to each tier. That being said, this iceberg is ranked from most well-known to the most obscure things, so it's going to be a bit of a roller coaster going through these tiers, because it'll be talking about some really goofy, funky shit about Ohio, and then it's just going to get into fucked up topics. Yeah, I think that's all I have to say for this intro. It's enough talking. You already know how these icebergs work. Let's just get into this. So starting off tier 1, swing state. Ohio is a swing state. It's not entirely Democratic, but not entirely Republican either. It's in the middle, kind of like me, even though I don't necessarily participate in my federal government. I hate the dynamic of modern politics. Next up is The Ohio State University. OSU is Ohio's pride and joy. I go here as we speak. In all honesty, it's a little overrated. Regardless, I love it here. Bars aren't too terrible. My time in general has just been pretty fun. Overall, OSU, good backup campus. The Ohio Burgee, or Burgie, both of those could even be wrong too. It's our state's flag, and the Buckeye, it's our state's tree. Buckeye has also kind of just become a part of our vocabulary down here in campus. Everyone refers to each other as Buckeyes. The Ohio State football team is referred to as the Ohio State Buckeyes. We worship a fucking Buckeye. In Newark, Ohio, I forget how far that is from here, there is a 7-story tall basket, and you can drive past it when you're going through State Route 16. If I recall correctly, no one or no company exactly uses the building anymore, and it's kind of just it's a bit of a tourist site if you're in the area. It's just something to drive past to just spice up the road trip a little. Number 5, Burger King foot lettuce. The last thing you want in your Burger King burger is someone else's foot fungus. But as it turns out, that might be what you get. Everyone knows about the legend of Burger King foot lettuce and the unoriginal content creators that milk this story by mocking Chills' voice as he's narrating. I'm honored to say that now I'm one of those unoriginal pieces of shit. A detail that not exactly everyone would care about is the fact that this Burger King foot lettuce incident took place in Ohio, specifically Mayfield Heights, Ohio. After this disgruntled employee posted this self-incriminating post on 4chan, the forums of 4chan went out of their way to hunt down this guy and get him fired. Next up is Cedar Point in Kings Island. They are the roller coaster capitals of the nation. Cedar Point was built in 1870 and Kings Island was built in 1972. Overall, both pretty fucking fun. I'd recommend going if you're just in the area. Of course, to be a downer, both parks have their fair share of accidents. CP, Cedar Point has a lot of wrist injuries and just a lot of stories about roller coaster cars malfunctioning and colliding with one another. And then Kings Island, there's a scary amount of deaths at Kings Island. There's more deaths at Kings Island than Cedar Point. Just people falling from rides, all that business. Somehow there was a guy at Kings Island that died, not because of a roller coaster, but because he got struck by lightning. Regardless of that, it's pretty fun. I mean, there's definitely better amusement parks, but if you're in Ohio, I'd recommend just visiting, just to experience it. And then to finish off tier 1, we have East Palestine. On February 3rd of 2023, a freight train was derailed in East Palestine, Ohio. The train was carrying a shit ton of hazardous materials, and of course, the civilians within the vicinity of the crash site, they had to evacuate. At the time of writing this script, it's about to be a year since the disaster happened, and it's kind of amazing considering that to this day, those affected by the accident are still trying to recover from very said accident, and I'm just wondering what exactly has happened in between then and now that they haven't been able to recover completely. And that is all of tier 1. We're gonna be going through these tiers pretty fast, so this is hopefully covering more tiers in this video is gonna make up for the lack of, I guess, substance for this video. Starting off tier 2, Neil Armstrong. He's the guy that landed on the moon, supposedly. I don't believe in the moon landing. Partially joking, but not really. He's also from Ohio. That's the only real reason he's on this iceberg, because he's from Ohio. And then the Paul brothers. They are also from Ohio. We know who these two are and their atrocious misadventures. Logan Paul is out in the world filming dead people and scamming others out of cryptocurrency. And then little brother Jakey is throwing hands in potentially rigged boxing matches. The mother of presidents, what that means is essentially 8 out of 44 of our presidents came from Ohio, deeming it the mother of presidents. From earliest to latest, it goes Harrison, Grant, Hayes, Garfield, Harrison, McKinley, Taft, and Harding. Jeffrey Dahmer, he went to OSU undecided and only lasted a quarter because he flunked out somehow. He used to live in Morrill Tower when he was here. I think it's up north in that direction. If the focusing stick really helps you. He didn't kill anybody while he was here. It was just a random chapter in his life. The birthplace of aviation. The Wright brothers, we know who those two are. They invented the first airplane. They're also from Ohio. I'd like to also add that I'm really sorry that a lot of this iceberg that I didn't add was just X was born in Ohio. That's partly the reason why I added my own topics, because it's not at all interesting to just say that this guy was born in Ohio and that's why it's important to this iceberg. And then after that, we have Wendy's. It was founded in Columbus, Ohio. Shocker. The only real thing I'm going to add to this topic is the fact that I'm pissed that Wendy's got rid of their cheesy pub fries. This is a bit of a warning, Wendy's. If you don't give me back my cheesy pub fries, the world is going to no pain. And then next up, we have Bullwinkle's. It is an 18-plus club off of High Street, and it's pretty much right next to campus. It is the bottom of the barrel in terms of OSU clubbing. A lot of freshmen go there, both college and high school, and that leads to also attracting creepy old men. People that go there in general, they're pretty ratchet, but if you're sick of seeing sweaty sports fans or even sweatier frat guys, then I guess you could say it's a nice change of environment. The most whack-ass shit tends to happen at Bulls. I want to say during winter or fall break, a Dodge Challenger collided head-on with another car, and then the people from Bulls somehow, they just decided to go to the crash site and then dance around the Challenger, shaking their asses like they're performing a ritual sacrifice to summon the Antichrist, currently going around in the modern day as Ice Spice. You thought I was feeling you? As a matter of fact, I think one of my boys got into a fight at Bulls. When the snow came down here a few weeks ago, they were doing a snowball fight because, why not? It's fucking, you're drunk, snowball fight sounds fun. And then I guess the wrong drunk dude caught a stray and took it personally. Overall, if you haven't gathered already, you would only really go to Bulls if you're wasted, to just either catch an STD or to catch some hands. And then finishing off tier 2, we have the stupid only in Ohio meme. This is pretty much the reason why Ohio kind of gets dogged on now by our generation. You see a bunch of dogs humping each other or some shit, only in Ohio. Some dude's head got cut clean off, only in Ohio. It's a fist fight on High Street that happened a few weeks ago, only in Ohio. And then moving on to tier 3, we're going to start off with Bone Thugs and Harmony. They are a 90s hip-hop and gangsta rap group that formed in Cleveland, Ohio. I want to say 2 hours north away from Columbus. Personally, I love them when I'm not listening to metal, and I've even seen them live. I think it was 2018 or so in Newport, also off of High Street, pretty much right next to campus. It was a fun concert. I just wish I was old enough to remember it and actually experience being a part of the concert. And then next up is Markiplier. That being said, Markiplier was born in Hawaii, but as we find out in his Draw My Life video, he wound up moving to Cincinnati. I think it's like an hour from Columbus. Mommy Plier, Markiplier's mom, still resides in Cincy, but Mark moved out to California since about 2014. And then number 3, Graders. It's another it was just founded here in 1870. Since then, it's expanded like McDonald's. Personally, I like Graders. I'm a bit of a milkshake guy, and they make them pretty well. I don't really know prices for milkshakes and ice cream, so I can't really comment in that regard. Not so fun fact. I lost my virginity in a Graders parking lot at 1 in the morning when my parents were out of town. I don't know why I told you all that, but that's I guess the only real thing I could add to make this interesting. Number 4, Cuyahoga River. It's located near Cleveland. It was infamously polluted with a shit ton of oils and other pollutants from the factories that were built along it. In 1969, the river caught fire, and it caused about 40 to 50K in damages, and this fire and its damage is what brought attention to the pollution in the river. Despite that, there were other fires prior to this, but I guess this one in particular did so much damage that it caused enough people to care about it. And then this is where things start to take a bit of a fucked up turn on this iceberg, the Kent State Massacre. May 4th, 1970, at least 300 students attending Kent State University. They were rallying together to protest about the USA's involvement in the Vietnam War. Specifically, them trying to aid, I guess, the good guys of Vietnam in clearing out the Viet Cong inhabiting Cambodia, which is my personal connection to the Vietnam War and this shit. The Ohio National Guard were there at Kent State to try and force the protesters to fall back, and their presence was also heavily protested by the students as a result. According to eyewitnesses, Sergeant Myron Pryor fired the initial shot that caused the National Guard to start shooting at the students. 13 of these protesting students were struck by the gunfire, and out of those 13, 4 students died as a result of the fucking National Guard shooting at these people. Allison Krause, Jeffrey Miller, Sandra Lee Schuer, and William Schroeder were the 4 to die because of whatever the fuck caused them to start shooting. That being said, Schroeder didn't die at the scene. He wound up dying in hospice from his injuries. The Vietnam War is already a pretty rocky era of America, but the Kent State Massacre is just an example of America's mishandling of this war. And then following that, we have Skyline Chili, opened in 1949 in Cincy. It is a chili dog place that also serves up spaghetti with chili instead of a bolognese. It's almost exclusively in Ohio, but some other states in the Midwest that have Skyline Chili are Kentucky, Indiana, and I guess Florida. This topic was partly the reason why I wanted to cover this iceberg, because this is in the same tier as the Kent State Massacre. This is what I meant earlier when I said there's going to be a lot of curveballs thrown in when covering these tiers. This is the most horrendous of these curveballs. But anyways, I love Skyline Chili. I'm still baffled that they have a meal referred to as the Children's Three-Way. Next up, Dimebag Darrell. We know who this man is. Darrell Lance Abbott was the guitarist for Pantera, one of my all-time favorite metal bands. Dimebag himself was born in Texas, but he was unfortunately taken from us on December 8th, 2004, while performing in Columbus, Ohio. He was shot multiple times by schizophrenic Nathan Gale. The incident was captured on security cameras, but it was only captured by one, and the assassination happens off screen, for those who are morbidly curious. One of the big reasons why I'm so pissed about being a Gen Zer, other than the fact that we suck, is the fact that I'll never get to experience bands like Pantera, Motorhead, Mayhem, Venom. You get the point. I want to experience watching these bands live when they were in their peak. And that is all the topics I have for Tier 3. I think this one's the quickest out of all of them so far. Now we move on to Tier 4. Hang On Sloopy by the McCoys is apparently OSU's band anthem. It's OSU lore that I've learned about rather than experience, so I can't exactly comment on it besides that. Following that, Steven Spielberg, Jesus Christ, I can't speak. He was born in Ohio. That's literally all there. Third is Sullivan Avenue. This place gets dogged on by the entirety of Ohio. It is notorious for its problems with drugs, general crime, and also prostitution. Overall, Sullivan Avenue, very rundown and looked down upon by other Ohioans. The most American state. Apparently, Ohio is ranked 7th as the most American state according to Viator.com. It's filled with a lot of landmarks, I guess, and in general, places like Columbus are considered as an example of an average city, whatever the fuck that means. Next up is Harambe. Harambe was murdered in the Cincinnati Zoo in 2016. We already know how this story goes. Some parent wasn't paying attention to their kid, and the piece of shit fell into Harambe's exhibit. Harambe was trying to care for the child, but of course, being a gorilla, he treated him how he would his own offspring. To add on top of that, people were also provoking Harambe, causing him, from his perspective, to be more stressed about the safety of the boy, and he was just dragging him around the enclosure. The zoo then shot him dead. We all know about the Harambe memes. Dicks out for Harambe, by the way. But jokes aside, it is a really fucked up topic. Like, how do you not pay attention to your child for a long enough time for them to fall into a zoo exhibit. Other than the people that shot Harambe, shitty parenting is what essentially killed him. I'm kind of joking and a bit serious when I say that life fell apart for all of us when Harambe was shot, because for some reason, Harambe dying is where my memories get all crystal clear. Everything falls apart after Harambe dies. But it's also kind of when I started my YouTube channel, and I say that's when my life begins to fall apart. Brian Schaefer was a student at OSU, and he went missing on April 1st of 2006. He went out drinking at the ugly Tuna Saloona that used to reside above the Gateway Theater. My current dorm is actually down the street from Gateway Theater. Brian was most definitely wasted by the time he goes missing, and to make things even more complicated and unpredictable, none of the security cameras at Tuna exactly caught a glimpse of him to try and give investigators a lead on where he could have possibly went. Unfortunately, to this day, Brian still remains missing, and this case is unsolved. The Fireball was an amusement park ride that used to be in the Ohio State Fair. Essentially, it's just a swing-based ride that had a spinning ring of seats. I used to ride the hell out of this thing. Pause. Before it was put out of commission. On July 26, 2017, one of these rows of seats was flung off the ride due to a corroded joint within the mechanism of the swing, I guess. 7 people were injured and 1 person died as a result of this accident. 18-year-old Tyler Jarrell was the unfortunate victim that passed away thanks to the Fireball. That was the last topic I had to talk about in Tier 4. Once again, zooming through these pretty fast. Things are starting to get a little heavier. Now we move on to Tier 5. So starting off Tier 5, we have young Cyrax. If you keep up with the lolcows on the internet, you're going to know exactly who this man is. Chance Wilkins is a lolcow that's tried numerous times to get into the rap game under his name Lil or Young Cyrax. And of course, being a lolcow, Cyrax has also tried to go after kids. You kind of have to expect that with these kind of people. There's also a shit ton of lore behind this guy. I'm going to be really glancing over a lot of this lore. But to summarize, he's a juggalo. He also shits himself. He's a racist. He's abusive. And very obviously, he has very atrocious hygiene. Just by looking at him, you can kind of tell that he's not exactly right in the head. But I also have the dishonor of potentially seeing this guy out in the wild because Cyrax is from Ohio, specifically Akron. Once again, the guy's story does run as deep as Chris Chan's lore. So if you're interested in seeing me talk about him in my own video, definitely make sure to comment that because give me ideas to talk about. Number 3, Tier 5, Satan's Hollow. Satan's Hollow is a rumored meeting spot for the Satanist in Cincy. There is a series of drainage tunnels that are rumored to be a potential portal to hell, and there are apparently also rogue spirits. What the fuck? Why can't I fucking just speak normal fucking English? Holy shit. There are supposedly rogue spirits that crawl around these tunnels like they're night crawlers. There's a lot of satanic graffiti that hype up these satanic urban legends. But overall, it's a mid-myth that's a part of Ohio. A lot of Satanist imagery in Ohio urban legends. And then there's Route 666. Route 666 is a route that runs from Zanesville to Dresden, Ohio. There's no creepy urban legends behind it, but I figured if we're going to be talking about Satan in this video, this is just a state route that just so happens to have the magic number. And then next up is Helltown. Helltown is an abandoned Native American village north of Columbus. Natives were driven out of this village, and ironically, the people that lived there after these natives, they were also driven out by the government for some reason. There's also real bad pollution that made rangers sick, leading to the rumors of mutants and Satanists and other weird, batshit insane serial killers and cryptids all seeking refuge within Helltown in some weird, oddly peaceful, violent community. There's also more notably a hoax video in 2016 that claimed that 4 teens were attacked by a resident monster in Helltown. I mean, I guess if you're young enough, you could see this video being real, but it's a hoax. Next up is the Albino Factory. There is an urban legend that there is an isolated factory in Dayton, Ohio that has, for some reason, only albino workers. I did talk about albinos in the Great Fetish Iceberg. In the older days, the Blood Bowl was supposedly the hub for a lot of gang activity in central Ohio. But nowadays, the only real people who visit the Blood Bowl are either mentally deranged like I am, or they're high schoolers who go there to have vape circle jerks like they're fiends. Next up, Lake Erie Monster. There are rumors that a river monster calls Lake Erie home, but as Wendigoon would put it, this urban legend is just taking the Loch Ness Monster and putting it in another body of water. The Lake Erie Monster, also known as Bessie, which already is unsubtle. It's a plesiosaur type river cryptid. Overall, just another F tier Ohio cryptid. Number 3, crybaby bridges. They're bridges that are rumored to be accompanied by the sounds of babies crying. But that being said, crybaby bridge is a generalized term rather than the name of one specific bridge in Ohio. Ohio has a lot of crybaby bridges. Crybaby bridges aren't exactly exclusive to Ohio. Up next, the Athens Lunatic Asylum. It's your typical 1800s insane asylum, spoiled with lobotomies and electroshock therapy. Of course, as society has evolved, these asylums can't exactly keep up with the times. The Cleveland Torso Murderer was a serial killer who killed at least 12, potentially 20 unidentified victims, mostly in Cleveland, Ohio. The murderer beheaded and dismembered his victims, taking every part he could of the torso, and then sometimes he even mutilated what was left of the torso itself. The torso murderer has never been identified to this day, and even if he was, he's probably dead by now, so that just means that he'll never face justice for the people he killed. And then finishing off this tier is the Silver Bridge Collapse. On December 15th, 1967, the Silver Bridge connecting Gallipolis, Ohio to Point Pleasant, West Virginia, it collapsed and it killed 46 people. The accident was caused by an obscure defective link that went unnoticed by those who were inspecting the fucking bridge. As I mentioned, while this did technically take place in Ohio, it's more important that it took place in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, because if this place sounds familiar to you, it is the Mothman capital of West Virginia. We know who the Mothman is. He is a scary, vaguely human moth-like creature who messes with people. It's rumored that before the bridge collapsed, he was sighted standing or at least flying over the bridge, deeming him a harbinger of destruction. But that being said, he hasn't been seen since the bridge collapsed. And then moving on from Tier 6, we move on to Tier 7. Starting off, we have the Axis. Not to be confused with the Axis Powers. The Axis is a nightclub near Short North, about a half an hour walk from my dorm, that is LGBTQ inclusive, which means that it's just a gay bar. Its inclusiveness appears to be very surface level and very deceptive. The bar is currently owned by supposed homophobes who support Republicans. The Axis also has a scary amount of druggings. There is an account on Instagram known as Club Axis is Transphobic, and they've been documenting everyone's experiences, and these druggings, they share one scary thing in common. It appears that the bartenders themselves are supposedly drugging everybody. If you want to check out the account for yourself, if you're curious about this topic, it'll be linked in the description. And then next up is the Hitler family. There's also 2 streets known as Hitler number 1 and Hitler number 2. And I guess it implies that Hitler Street was so cool they decided to make a second one. The Hitler family of Ohio are nothing more than just humble farm folk who were ironically respected by their community. 2 extremely notable members of this family are George Washington Hitler and his son, Gay Hitler. Gay Hitler also became a dentist, making him Dr. Gay Hitler. Hitler shows up a weird amount of times on this tier, specifically in this iceberg. And then number 3, the pizza swastika. So in 2020, 2 employees working at a Little Caesars made a swastika on a pizza using the pepperonis. Very obviously, the people buying this pizza weren't exactly fond of getting a Nazi pizza. If you couldn't tell, this incident also happened in Ohio. The employees were very obviously fired, and this topic is probably one of the funniest things I've had to do research on in a long time. And then next up is the Werewolf of Defiance. In 1972, in Defiance, Ohio, Ted Davis and a co-worker had witnessed a creature that resembled a werewolf walking along the railroad tracks that they were working at. They reported their sighting to the police, and for a short amount of time, there were a lot of people calling in to report their sightings of a wolfman walking around the area. But these sightings stopped as quickly as they came. And then finishing off this tier is Ariel Castro. From the span of 2002 to 2004, Michelle Knight, Amanda Berry, and Gina DeJesus went missing in that order. They were kidnapped by a then 42-year-old Ariel Castro. Knight was 21 when she was kidnapped, Berry was kidnapped at 17, and DeJesus was kidnapped when she was 14. Castro just sexually abused these 3 women. On Christmas Day 2006, Berry would give birth to her child with Castro. They were held captive in his house in Cleveland, Ohio until 2013. On May 6th of that year, Castro had forgotten to lock the front door, and Berry was able to scream for help from behind the storm door. Thankfully, her cries for help were answered by neighbors who just so happened to see her while they were passing by. Charles Ramsey and Angel Cordero, if that's how you pronounce it, they kicked down the door, called the cops, and rescued the 3 women from Castro's captivity. Of course, Castro was then promptly arrested and sentenced to life in prison plus 1,000 years without parole. If this sounds a little bit familiar to you, then you'll also know that this incident also spawned a viral meme. The interview of Charles Ramsey with the news station talking about how he discovered the girls, how he saved them, it got remixed into a bed intruder type song.
They're giving away. They're giving away. My neighbor got big testicles because we see this dude every day.
I mean, it was, in general, it was just a weird trend back then to just take a rambunctious fella that was interviewed on TV and just remixing them into a banger. And that's all we have for tier 7. Now we move on to tier 8, the very last tier of this iceberg. Starting off, we have Samuel Mullet. Samuel Mullet was an Amish man who broke off and started his own Amish community in Berkholes, Ohio in 1995. They had a lot of abnormal practices that broke away from, the traditional Amish values. They didn't practice Sunday service. They indulged in sexual deviancy, that's how I put it. And they rejected the pacifist and Christian ideas of a typical Amish community. From the span of September to November of 2011, Samuel's cult went on a mass beard shaving spree, shaving the beard and hair of those who opposed the community's ideals. Wendigoon also talked about this guy in his cult iceberg, if this sounds familiar to you. Mullet and 15 of his acolytes were charged with federal conspiracy and hate crime, and they were sentenced to spend from about 1 year in jail to about 7. And Mullet himself, being the ringleader of all this shit, spent 15, although they did get their sentences reduced. As Wendigoon put it himself, it is an extremely hilarious image having someone break into your house to shave your beard out of spite. Next up is the Gore Orphanage. It is rumored to be the hub for ghost children who were victim to a fire that burned down the orphanage referred to as Gore Orphanage. It is said you could hear the cries of children if you were just to walk past the remains of the orphanage, but if you were to explore it, you could hear them more clearly. If you haven't caught on, Gore Orphanage is just another mid-myth from Ohio. It is the name of a road in Vermilion, Ohio. There's no actual orphanage referred to as the Gore Orphanage. The Gore in Gore Orphanage Street refers to the narrow strip of land that goes alongside the road. Other than that, the building that is rumored to be the orphanage is actually just the remains of an abandoned mansion. If you can't tell by now, Ohio has a lot of really shitty urban legends. And then next up is the Great Fetish Iceberg. If you recall from my coverage in part 4, I mentioned that the tiers 8 and 9 are the only tiers I won't be covering from that series. On tier, I think it's 8 or 9 in particular, there is a topic referred to as Ohio. Looking into this topic, I found a extremely long 4chan post about a man developing a fetish for the state of Ohio. I'm gonna try to summarize the story as best as I can because there's a lot of useless just fucking sentences that are said by OP. Essentially, OP is just he's really into hunting. He's more into like the history and like the value there is in hunting. He goes to Ohio and meets up with an author of a famous book. He goes out into the woods with this man, and he essentially drugs OP and makes him see a lot of psychedelic shit. And then the author then appears to be touching him inappropriately as he's explaining the beauty of nature, specifically of Ohio, talking about the tectonic plates and their shifting across the world. And OP achieves supposedly the best orgasm he's felt in his whole life. And nothing compares to this experience he felt with this strange man that drugged him in the middle of the woods. I guess the whole reason he's posting about this is because he wants to go back and contact him and like join him in another trip to the woods, and he doesn't know what to do. So he asks forms of 4chan whether or not he should go through and meet up with this guy again. I think I summarized it a little terribly, but that's the gist of it. It's just a guy that had a very, very sketchy sexual experience, and now he has a fetish for Ohio. Next up is the Lake Hope Furnace. Southeast of Columbus, there's an iron furnace that was put out of commission in 1874. furnace itself is made out of sandstone, and it is theorized to have stood in the center of a large community of people. All the buildings from this community have been torn down except for the furnace. It just remains as another landmark of Ohio if you're in the area. And then finishing off this tier and the video as a whole, we have Coshocton, Ohio. Coshocton is a humble small town northeast of Columbus. It's a town where every inhabitant knows one another. You know how it is. The only reason I put it on this iceberg is because I was born in this part of Ohio. I came down to Columbus when I was 3 to 4 years old, so my memories of Coshocton are long gone. And with that, that is the entirety of the Great Ohio Iceberg. We zipped through a lot of these tiers pretty fast. There was very few topics compared to the Great Fetish Iceberg, but I felt an iceberg would... It was just something I felt interested in doing for a video. Plus, it's probably something that'll jack up my views again, like the Great Fetish Iceberg. I don't know. I needed to get something made because I want to say it's been like... It's been more than 2 weeks since I've made the last video on this channel, and it's been awful. It's been so awful trying to make a video. Hopefully, by the week after the next or so, I'll have another video out. But till then, I can't make any promises. This is all I really have to say. I don't really know how to end off this video. Like, comment, and subscribe. Stay tuned for whatever topic I talk about next. Bye-bye.